Jeff Garcia, best known for being the voice of Sheen in Jimmy Neutron, died on December 10, 2025 at age 50 after a terrible chain of medical emergencies that began months earlier. He first suffered a brain aneurysm that caused him to collapse and hit his head, then later endured a stroke that left his health severely weakened. After a bout of pneumonia and repeated hospital visits for trouble breathing, Jeff's condition crashed when one of his lungs suddenly collapsed, forcing doctors to place him on life support. His family ultimately made the decision to pull the plug, ending a rapid decline that left fans stunned. That same day, veteran voice actor Jim Ward, who played Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome, and dozens of other roles, died at 66 after years of complications with advanced Alzheimer's disease. Ward had already retired from voice work several years earlier as the disease progressed, losing his ability to continue performing before eventually requiring long-term care. According to his wife, the disease steadily deteriorated his health until his death on December 11, 2025. Together, their deaths marked the losses of two of the most iconic voices of Nickelodeon cartoons. Creator Bonnie Blue has been arrested in Bali after police raided a villa suspected of being used to film explicit content. 16 men were detained with her, but while most were released, Bonnie and 2 British men were held as officers seized phones and cameras based on a tip from inside the villa. She's now in immigration custody, questioned daily and without her passport, as officials prepare a court hearing and consider deportation in a long-term blacklist. Under Indonesia's morality laws, producing pornographic content can carry up to 15 years in prison. Mary Carol McDonnell, a 73-year-old former true crime TV producer, allegedly conned banks by posing as the heiress to an $80 million trust fund that never existed, securing nearly $30 million in fraudulent loans, including a $15 million payout she was never qualified to receive. But before the scheme unraveled, she completely disappeared, leaving behind a federal indictment, multiple aliases, and lenders scrambling to recover their losses. With possible ties to Los Angeles, Alabama, and Dubai, she was added to the FBI's most wanted list in 2025 as one of the country's most elusive white-collar fugitives. Jack Black's teenage years were marked by addiction long before fame entered his life. After his parents divorced, he began stealing money from his mom to buy cocaine at just 14 years old, spiraling into substance abuse while still practically a child. The addiction took hold during a period of instability and isolation, but he later thanked a non-judgmental school therapist with helping to pull him back from it. Jack ultimately got sober as a teenager, avoided relapsing as his career took off, and has spoken openly about how early intervention likely saved his life. In 1986, a Yakuza member attempting to smuggle a live hand grenade onto a flight from Manila to Osaka nearly took down the whole plane by accident. While hiding in the airport bathroom, the grenade's safety pin came loose, and in a moment of panic, the man abandoned it and fled back to his seat. Seconds later, the grenade exploded inside the aircraft, blasting a hole in the fuselage and resulting in rapid decompression. The explosion injured 109 passengers, but the plane somehow remained airborne long enough to make an emergency landing, narrowly avoiding what could have been one of the deadliest aviation attacks of the decade. Investigators later revealed that the man wasn't immediately arrested because he'd been badly injured in the blast. When the explosion ruptured a hydraulic line, hot oil sprayed all over his body, leaving him with severe burns that required immediate hospitalization before he was taken into custody. This is one of the rarest events in nature a human can lay their eyes on, an atmospheric phenomenon known as a sun candle or light pillar forming at full intensity. The column forms when sunlight reflects off of flat ice crystals suspended in calm, freezing air, stacking the light into a heavenly beam stretching to the ground. Conditions have to be absolutely perfect, and most sun candles are often faint or brief. This one is unusually bright, tall, and sharply defined, making it a once-in-a-lifetime sight for skiers and snowboarders. This video shows one of the rarest congenital conditions ever documented in dogs, short spine syndrome. The disorder occurs when the spine fails to fully develop before birth, causing the body to appear unusually compressed while the legs remain close to normal length. Affected dogs often have little to no visible neck and a shortened, rigid back, though many can still walk and function completely normally. Fewer than a handful of confirmed cases have been documented worldwide, making it so rare that most veterinarians will never encounter one in their entire careers. YouTube prankster Vitali rose to fame in the early 2010s for viral public stunts built around shock, confrontation, and pushing social boundaries. But as his platform grew, those stunts increasingly crossed into real-world violence. In 2014, he was arrested in Miami Miami after physically attacking a woman in what he called a prank. Years later, Vitaly admitted he was high on psychedelic mushrooms when he punched another woman in the face, a completely unprovoked assault that left her with serious facial injuries requiring hospitalization. In 2016, he escalated further by carrying out a bomb hoax at LAX that caused mass panic and resulted in criminal convictions. In 2022, he was detained again after running onto the field during the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, interrupting a live international match and being forcibly removed by security. Afterward, Vitaly's behavior only continued to deteriorate, culminating in his arrests in the Philippines in April of 2025 after a series of live-streamed incidents in Manila where he was filmed harassing mall security guards, confronting random civilians, trespassing on private property, and allegedly stealing a security guard's phone during an altercation. Philippine authorities classified the conduct as harassment, theft, and public disorder, charging him with various offenses including unjust vexation. He's currently detained at a jail facility in Taguig while awaiting trial, and has not been deported after both the United States and Russia declined to accept him. Vitaly has already spent around 8 months in pretrial detention, and if convicted, he faces up to 18 months in a Philippine prison, following a steady escalation from viral stunts to criminal charges. Acclaimed filmmaker and actor Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner have been found dead in their Brentwood, Los Angeles home in what investigators are investigating as an apparent homicide. Emergency responders discovered the couple inside the residence during a medical aid call when their daughter Romy reportedly found them dead with their throats slit. Their 32-year-old son Nick Reiner was taken into custody and held on $4 million bail in connection with the deaths, though police have not publicly released a confirmed motive. Nick has a well-documented history of long-term drug addiction and periods of homelessness, first entering rehab around age 15 and struggling for years before finally getting clean. He later worked with his father on the 2015 film Being Charlie, which drew on his experiences with addiction and recovery. Rob Reiner was one of Hollywood's most recognizable directors and actors, known for films such as Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. His death alongside his wife's has sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry as authorities continue their investigation. This was the moment when a quiet shopping afternoon at a California mall erupted into chaos, as roughly 25 masked intruders stormed a jewelry store in San Ramon in September of 2025. Surveillance footage shows the group rushing in almost simultaneously, smashing glass display cases with crowbars as customers and employees scrambled for safety. The entire robbery unfolded in less than 2 minutes, with suspects scooping up over $1 million in jewelry. When security doors partially locked, trapping some of them inside, at least one suspect fired a gun at the door to force an escape. The group then scattered into multiple waiting vehicles, several later confirmed stolen, triggering a nationwide police response and pursuit. Investigators described the robbery as highly coordinated and pre-planned, with roles assigned and several lookouts positioned outside, and said it mirrored a growing wave of increasingly aggressive mob-style jewelry heists in the area. Several suspects were arrested in the days that followed, facing robbery, conspiracy, and weapons charges, but authorities say most of the suspects involved in the coordinated heist remain at large. Disney casted Tim Allen as the Santa Claus in 1994. The studio quietly broke its own rule against hiring ex-convicts. Back in 1978, he was arrested at the airport while trying to smuggle more than a pound of cocaine and faced a possible life sentence before cutting a deal to inform on other dealers. He spent over 2 years in federal prison, getting out in 1981, then spent the next decade rebuilding his career until Home Improvement turned him into a star in 1991. So by the time Disney handed him the lead role in the Santa Claus, they were making one of the rarest casting exceptions in company history, turning a former federal prisoner into the face of Christmas. A recent medical case from Denmark describes a 39-year-old man who died within 26 hours after drinking water from a coconut that had been sitting unrefrigerated on a kitchen table for more than a month. When he punctured it with a straw, he noticed it tasted strange but kept drinking. Inside, the coconut had become contaminated with Aspergillus flavus, a fungus that produces aflatoxin, one of the most potent natural liver poisons known. Within hours, he developed abdominal pain, vomiting, and liver failure. And despite emergency treatment, he died the next day from drinking coconut water. This woman's life has been changed forever by a random horrific attack that lasted only a few seconds. 46-year-old Ashley Wazalewski was suddenly attacked without warning while walking near Forsyth Park in Savannah, Georgia, after attending a Christmas program at a nearby church on December 10, 2025. A stranger had approached her from behind and poured a corrosive chemical directly over her head, causing immediate catastrophic burns. The liquid ate through her clothing, burned deep into her skin, and was so caustic it melted a key fob in her pocket as it spread across her body. body. She suffered second and third degree burns over more than half her body, including her face and scalp, and began screaming as her clothes started burning off her skin. The attacker didn't take anything from her and simply fled the scene within seconds. A good Samaritan rushed in to help as she wailed in agony and called her family. Wazalewski was quickly transferred to the Augusta Burn Center, where doctors say recovery will involve prolonged hospitalization, multiple surgeries, and permanent scarring. As of the latest updates, the attacker has not yet been identified or arrested. Noah Schnapp has opened up about the psychological toll of playing Will Byers, a character subjected to prolonged fear, possession, and isolation starting when Schnapp was just 11 years old. He said that repeatedly filming scenes of terror and helplessness made it difficult to separate himself emotionally from the character, particularly during the earlier seasons when he was still developing emotionally. He later acknowledged that much of his early work required him to access fear and distress far beyond what most children experience at that age. But let's be honest, the real morbid fact here is that bowl cut. My God, they did him dirty. Caleb McLaughlin and Pryor Ferguson have both stated that becoming famous as children on Stranger Things exposed them to racist harassment from fans. They've said some of the harassment even escalated to messages threatening violence, including death threats, even when they were still just children. Maya Hawke has said her childhood unfolded under the shadow of a very public family collapse after her father Ethan Hawke had an affair with the family nanny, an event she's described as shattering her sense of stability. She grew up amid the fallout of that breakup, which she's linked to long-term anxiety and feelings of abandonment. As a child, Maya also struggled with severe dyslexia, falling so behind academically that she was eventually pulled out of school because she couldn't read at the expected level, leaving her isolated during years when structure and security were already unraveling. While filming the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980, photographer Robert Landsberg realized he had no chance of surviving it. So he wound the film back, put his camera in his backpack, and laid on top of it to protect the film for future researchers. Whiskey distiller Jack Daniel died after kicking his safe because he forgot his combination. He injured his big toe and it got infected, so he had to have his foot amputated. But the infection spread to the rest of his system and he died from complications. On 9/11, there was only one American in space, and this is the photo he took from the International Space Station. The first person to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge was a professional high diver. He wanted to demonstrate that people don't die simply from falling through the air, and he was correct. He fell 135 feet through the air without a problem, but hitting the water killed him immediately. 8,500 feet up the slope of Mount Everest, a creepy marker serves as a guide for climbers. Known as the Green Boots, everyone approaching the summit from the north side must pass by Suang Paljor's body. It's seen as a milestone because it's an indication of just how close one is to the top of the mountain. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a Hickey. The suction resulted in a blood clot that traveled to the brain, eventually causing a stroke. In 2003, David and Tina Watson were scuba diving on their honeymoon in the Great Barrier Reef. When currents became too rough, David, an experienced diver, swam to the surface while his wife struggled in panic. This photo captures Tina lying helplessly on the sea floor in her final moments before drowning. This is a photo of Otto Warmbier begging for mercy while on trial for stealing a propaganda poster in North Korea. He returned to the US with irreversible brain damage and died 6 years later. This is the crevice where Aaron Ralston cut off his own arm to free himself after being trapped by a massive boulder. He did it using nothing but a dull pocket knife, and the movie 127 Hours is based on his triumph. During a 1998 soccer match in the Republic of Congo, a lightning bolt struck one of the goal pitches. It killed all 11 members of the home team, who were all wearing metal spikes. The other team was left completely unscathed, for they had all been wearing rubber cleats. When Teddy Roosevelt was 25, his wife and his mother both died on Valentine's Day, just hours apart from each other. For his diary entry that day, he drew a large black X and wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." When some whales get old, they no longer have the strength to swim for long distances. So if they swim too deep, they might not have enough strength to reach the surface for air and eventually suffocate to death. Throughout your life, you're more likely to meet a future murderer than you are to have a lasting marriage. In 2010, a homeless man named Hugo saved a woman from a knife attack in New York City. He was stabbed while trying to help, but still chased the attacker before collapsing from his wounds. Security cams captured more than 20 people walking past and staring at him, but no one offered to help. He was found dead on the sidewalk more than an hour later. After donating blood for the first time, a 21-year-old Canadian woman has lost the ability to move her right arm. The nurse accidentally drew blood from an artery instead of a vein, causing damage that was permanent. During his reign, Genghis Khan killed so many people that it was actually good for the environment. The 40 million or so deaths he was responsible for dropped the Earth's carbon levels by an estimated 700 million tons. Morgan Freeman says he always wears his earrings because they're worth just enough to pay for a coffin if he happened to die in a strange place. In 2010, the body of Argentinian model Joana Casas was found just before her 20th birthday. She had been shot twice in the head and was left in a field. Her former boyfriend was soon convicted of the murder and sentenced to 13 years in prison. 3 years later, while still in prison, the man ended up falling in love with Joanna's twin sister Edith. Despite her parents intervening, Edith went on to marry her twin sister's murderer. In 2008, a Kansas man named Corey McFerrin called 911 claiming there was something wrong with his girlfriend. When authorities arrived, they were horrified to find that his 35-year-old girlfriend had been sitting on the toilet for at least 2 years. Her skin had grown around the toilet seat and had to be surgically removed at the hospital. Her boyfriend claimed that because of her troubled childhood, she felt safe in the bathroom and never left. In 2009, a Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin went to the doctors suspecting something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they had never seen before. It turned out that years ago, he inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. Pigs have been known to feast on just about anything. There are even stories of pigs breaking into farmhouses and eating newborn babies. The ship that inspired the story of Moby Dick was named the Essex. After being shipwrecked by a sperm whale, the crew avoided stepping foot on surrounding islands out of fear of cannibals. But because of this bypass, the men soon ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. A teen boy injected himself with mercury at least 3 times while attempting to convert his bones into metal after watching X-Men Origins Wolverine. He was also intentionally bitten by spiders multiple times so that he could become Spider-Man. This endangered baby dolphin died shortly after this photo was taken because swimmers were passing it around for selfies. A man once threw a mouse into a pile of burning leaves. The mouse then ran into the man's home while still on fire and burned the entire house down. When people are electrocuted and thrown far distances, it is the result of sudden violent muscle contractions, not the shock itself. This has raised questions about the actual strength and subconscious capabilities of the muscles of the human body. If Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin got stuck on the moon, the official policy was to cut off communication and let them slowly suffocate in silence. President Nixon even had a speech prepared in case this happened. The speech read, quote, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace." Actor Bela Lugosi famously played Count Dracula in the 1931 film. As per his request, he was dressed in vampire clothing during his open casket funeral in 1956. Chad Vera was a priest who started the very first suicide hotline in 1953. He decided to start it after directing a funeral for a girl who took her own life when she had her first period. She believed she had contracted an STD and had no one to talk to reassure her. When Ben Franklin's London home was renovated in 1998, 15 human bodies, including 6 children, were discovered in the basement. Archaeologists agree that they were buried at the same time Franklin had been living in the home. While police initially thought it was the work of a serial killer, the bodies were likely stolen by his friend William Hewson so that he could study anatomy. When Joseph Stalin was dying, his private physician was not available. This is because he was already being tortured in the KGB headquarters for suggesting that Stalin get more bed rest. A Thai woman once accidentally slipped on mud, grabbed a naked live wire, and was electrocuted to death. After the funeral, her sister was showing her neighbors how the accident happened. Suddenly, she herself slipped, grabbed the same live wire, and was also electrocuted to death. In 2008, 23-year-old Rachel Hoffman was arrested for possession of marijuana and was facing 4 years in prison. Police told her that the only way to get out of the prison time was to become a confidential informant. She agreed, and her first undercover drug purchase would have been one of the biggest in Florida history. Police told her to buy 1,500 pills as well as a gun from some drug dealers. But the dealers found a wire in her purse and she was murdered with the gun that she was buying. Pablo Picasso used to carry around a revolver loaded with blanks. And when people asked him about the meaning of his paintings, he would pretend to shoot them in the face. In 2012, 66-year-old Stevie Crecelius went to the hospital thinking he had a kidney stone. During that visit, he would find out that he actually had a strange condition and had been a woman his whole life. Nicolas Cage has already bought his grave, and it's a 9-foot-tall pyramid in Louisiana. In 2005, a suicidal man in California parked his car in front of a commuter train. The train hit his car but derailed and collided with 2 additional trains. The accident resulted in 11 deaths and nearly 200 injuries, but the man survived and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Masabumi Hosono was the only Japanese passenger on the Titanic, and he managed to survive the sinking. But after returning to his home country, he was publicly condemned and lost his job for not going down with the other passengers. President JFK's brain has been missing from the National Archives for more than 50 years. Stanley Meyer was one of the first to invent a car that was completely powered by water. He claimed that it was capable of traveling across the country on just 72 liters of tap water, which would have revolutionized the auto industry and made gasoline obsolete. But shortly after creating the car, Stanley died while meeting with investors. His brother said he ran out of the restaurant choking, looked at him and said, "They've poisoned me." In 1985, a black bear was found dead due to a cocaine overdose in a forest in Georgia. The bear had eaten 76 pounds of cocaine out of a duffel bag that fell from the plane of a drug smuggler. Shortly before dying, he was probably the most dangerous apex predator on the planet. This photo of a kidney stone under an electron microscope shows you why they're so painful. Bruce Lee's son Brandon was accidentally killed on the set of The Crow when he was only 28 years old. A prop gun was loaded improperly, causing dummy bullets to fire at him with the same force as live ammunition. In 2014, Harvard University discovered that 2 books in their library were bound using human skin. One of the books is called Destinies of the Soul. In the book, the author wrote a note that said, "A book about the human soul deserved to have a human covering." George Washington died when his doctors were trying to cure his sore throat. They were using a process called bloodletting, which involved draining a patient's blood until their illness was cured. He lost nearly half his blood before they stopped the treatment, and he died just a few hours later. According to the FBI, if you're murdered in the US, there's only about a 40% chance that your murderer will be found and punished. When penguins can't find love, they often waddle off to die alone. An Iranian man named Amu Haji is known as the world's dirtiest man. The 80-year-old man hasn't showered in 65 years and claims that cleanliness makes man sick. He has survived off of eating rotten animal carcasses and smokes feces out of a pipe. He also lives in complete isolation, and yes, ladies, he's single. You should never shine a flashlight on a newborn sea turtle. If the flash is too long, the turtle will start crawling around in circles known as the Ring of Death. This means the turtle's eyesight has been permanently damaged due to mistaking your light for the moon that guides it to the sea. By doing this, you are basically sentencing the turtle to death right after its birth. The first chainsaw was invented by 2 Scottish doctors in the year 1780. It was originally used to help open up the pelvis during childbirth. The Gympie Gympie is a tree covered in tiny hairs that are comparable to hypodermic needles. And if you touch it, it will secrete a toxin that's so painful that it's driven humans and animals to suicide. It is apparently comparable to being burnt with hot acid and electrocuted at the same time. A man once used the Gympie Gympie as toilet paper and ended up shooting himself shortly afterward. Frank Sinatra died on May 14th, 1998, the same night as the series finale of Seinfeld. His ambulance made it to the hospital in record time due to there being no traffic since everyone was home watching the show. About 1 in 50 people is walking around with a brain aneurysm that just hasn't ruptured yet. This means there's a chance you can instantly die from a headache without any prior symptoms. The astronauts on the Challenger most likely didn't die immediately from the explosion. They spent the last 3 minutes of their lives plummeting to Earth at 200 miles an hour. In 2015, the Department of Homeland Security conducted a test on the TSA at dozens of airports. A group of agents posing as passengers snuck various weapons through airport security. The TSA ended up failing to detect 95% of the weapons that went through the scanning system. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of the photo died, but the man shown with his daughter happened to survive. A healthy human heart can only beat for about 1 minute when removed from the body, but the heart of a coke user can beat for up to 25 minutes outside of the body. In 2011, a 17-year-old boy jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge to impress his friends. The jump has a 98% death rate, but the boy survived with only minor bruising. 5 members of the Trinidad family died when Alvin Hubbard crashed into the family minivan, leaving Mother Mary Rose as the only survivor. Alvin claimed the crash was caused by a coughing fit, and he only received 1 year probation since prosecutors couldn't find any evidence of reckless conduct. After the sentencing, Mary Rose said it was as if her family was killed all over again. There's a Mickey Mouse comic strip from 1930 in which Minnie leaves Mickey for another mouse. In response, Mickey proceeds to attempt suicide in various ways. On Friday the 13th in October 1972, a plane carrying 45 people crashed into the Andes Mountains. Faced with radio reports that the search for them had been abandoned, the survivors had to resort to eating their friends. 16 remaining survivors were finally rescued 72 days after the initial crash. After suffering a stroke that left him speech impaired, legendary actor Kirk Douglas tried to commit suicide by shooting himself through the mouth. But the barrel of the gun hit his tooth and it hurt him so badly that he didn't go through with it. He was then so amused that a toothache had stopped him from killing himself that he decided to live. In 2009, a drunk Russian man named Alexei Rostkov jumped out of his 5th-story window after drinking 3 bottles of vodka. When he returned only to find his wife screaming at him, he decided to jump a second time and survived again. In order to enforce prohibition in the 1920s, the Prohibition Bureau began adding poison to industrial alcohol to prevent people from drinking it. Supporters of the policy argued that victims were basically killing themselves by breaking the law. Up to 50,000 people were killed as a result of the government's poisoning. In the 1950s, LA businessman Richard Poncher purchased the crypt above Marilyn Monroe's. As a final wish, he asked his wife to bury him face down so that he could spend all of eternity on top of Marilyn Monroe. The deadliest air attack in human history happened a few months before Hiroshima. In March of 1945, the U.S. Air Force painted a giant flaming X over the heart of Tokyo using napalm strikes. At least 100,000 Japanese civilians were killed within a span of 3 hours. There's a section of Yellowstone where you could get away with murder due to a loophole in the U.S. Constitution. The Zone of Death is a 50-square-mile piece of Idaho that's completely uninhabited. This means if you commit a crime within this zone, there could be no jury since no one lives there, and therefore no trial for the crime. In 1999, Jay-Z stabbed a man in the stomach with a 5-inch blade after rumors that the man was behind the bootlegging of one of his albums. He later pleaded guilty to 3rd-degree assault and accepted a sentence of 3 years probation. Hans Schmidt was the only Catholic priest to ever be executed in the U.S. Once his mistress became pregnant, he slit her throat, drank her blood, and dismembered her body. He was found guilty of the heinous crime and executed via electric chair in 1916. In the year 2000, an art exhibit in Denmark featured 10 functioning blenders containing live goldfish. Visitors were given the option of pressing the on button to instantly kill one fish for absolutely no reason. At least one person pressed the button since 2 fish were dead by the end of the exhibition. The museum director was charged with and later acquitted of animal cruelty. This is why you should always make sure you're in the right Uber. In 2019, 21-year-old Samantha Josephson hopped into the Uber she ordered after a night at the bar. However, she quickly realized she'd entered the wrong vehicle, but the driver locked the windows and had child-proof locks on the doors. He then proceeded to stab her more than 100 times with a double-bladed knife. Josephson lost so much blood that there was only 1 tablespoon left in her entire body when it was found. 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland was later sentenced to life behind bars for the horrific murder. Since 2004, at least 18 people have died from rabies after receiving organ transplants from infected donors. Transplanted organs are typically not screened for rabies, which can incubate for more than a year before any symptoms show, at which point it's 100% fatal. Rock legend Dave Grohl has tried to live as frugally as possible after watching his mother suffer a stroke while filing her taxes. Famous philosopher Kirk Douglas had an obsessive fear of being poisoned, so he only ate food cooked by his wife. When his wife went to the hospital for an extended stay, Douglas stopped eating completely and promptly starved to death. If you're ever dared to swim in a tank that looks like this, say no. Aeration tanks have a much lower density than water and therefore very little buoyancy. This means if you fall into one, you will certainly drown. In 1961, 5-year-old Nancy Brewster got a lump on her neck and was eventually too sick to go to school. So her deeply religious family brought her to a Christian practitioner who simply prayed for her and said that her illness was an illusion. When she died horribly 2 years later, there was no funeral and the family never spoke of her again. If you ever have to sneeze, just let it rip. In 2018, a British man blew a hole in his throat by holding his nose and mouth shut while sneezing. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks and lucky to be alive. Alexander Litvinenko was a former Russian spy who heavily criticized Vladimir Putin. In 2006, he was quickly rushed to the hospital after being poisoned with a cup of tea in a London hotel. Working with Scottish detectives as he lay dying, he was able to trace the lethal substance to one of his former comrades in the Russian Secret Service, thus solving his own murder case. Serial killer Derek Todd Lee killed 7 women over a 10-year span, but he was almost never caught due to police believing the suspect was white. He was rumored to have used a recording of a crying baby to lure his victims out of their homes. In 2007, a British woman named Amy Dalamura was banned from being within 50 meters of the sea. This is because she unsuccessfully tried to commit suicide by jumping into the water more than 50 times, costing police, Coast Guards, and the Royal Air Force at least $1 million combined. In 2010, a woman from Quebec parked her car in the middle of the highway so that she could help a family of ducklings cross. But this caused a motorcyclist to slam into her car, killing he and his teenage daughter instantly. The animal lover was found guilty of criminal negligence and sentenced to 90 days in jail. While filming Night at the Museum 3, Robin Williams struggled with panic attacks and often had trouble remembering even one line. His autopsy later revealed that he'd been suffering from a severe form of dementia and lost more than 40% of the dopamine neurons in his brain.